There is a person in your life, maybe you are that person, who simply does not have the apps. No scrolling before sleep, no checking what others posted, no quiet performance of a life for an invisible audience. Most people assume it is a preference, a personality quirk, maybe even a little antisocial. But when you look more carefully at who tends to step away from social media and why they stay away, something more interesting emerges. It is not always about discipline. It is not always about privacy. Sometimes it is about a particular kind of self-awareness, a sensitivity to performance that others do not feel as strongly, a discomfort with the gap between the life being lived and the version of it being shown. Some people scroll and feel nothing unusual. Others scroll and feel something they cannot quite name, and eventually, quietly, they stop. That difference is not random, and it says something significant about how certain minds are wired, what they protect, and what they refuse to pretend. Some people don't step away from social media because they lack discipline. They step away because they notice too much. To understand that difference, it helps to look at what actually happens in those small moments most people barely notice. There is a familiar scene. A person picks up their phone without thinking. A few seconds turn into minutes. A photo appears. A vacation, a celebration, a carefully framed version of someone's life. For many people, it passes through without friction. Just another image. Just another post. But for some, the experience lands differently. There is a pause. Not always conscious. Sometimes just a subtle tightening in the chest, or a quiet shift in attention. Something about the image feels constructed. Not false exactly, but incomplete in a way that becomes difficult to ignore. They might keep scrolling, but the experience is no longer neutral. What makes this confusing is that nothing explicitly wrong has happened. No one lied, no one made a direct comparison, and yet something about the interaction feels slightly off, as if they are being asked to participate in a version of reality that does not fully match what they know to be true. Over time, that subtle discomfort accumulates. It shows up in small behaviors, closing the app sooner than intended, putting the phone down without quite knowing why, feeling a kind of mental fatigue that is difficult to explain, especially when everyone else seems unaffected. From the outside, it can look like disinterest. From the inside, it feels more like friction. And this is where the pattern starts to reveal something deeper. Psychologists who study social behavior often talk about impression management, the process of shaping how we are perceived by others. For most people, this happens almost automatically, adjusting tone, choosing what to share, deciding what to leave out. It is a normal part of navigating social environments, but not everyone experiences it the same way. For some, the awareness of that process is sharper, more visible. They do not just see what is being shared, they see the structure behind it, the selection, the framing, the quiet decisions that turn a lived experience into a presentable one. And once that awareness becomes clear, it is difficult to turn it off. Scrolling no longer feels like observing reality. It feels like observing performance. For most people, it's content. For you, it's construction. That does not mean the content is dishonest. It means the viewer is seeing more of the mechanism than most people do. And that changes the experience entirely. You may have noticed something similar in other areas of life. A conversation where someone is being polite, but you can feel what is not being said. A compliment that carries a subtle expectation underneath it. A moment where the tone shifts slightly, and you sense it before anything explicit happens. That same sensitivity shows up here. The difference is that social media compresses thousands of these micro-performances into a single stream. For some minds, that becomes overwhelming in a very quiet way. It is not loud, it is not dramatic, it is cumulative. There is another layer to this. Studies on self-awareness and cognitive processing suggest that people who naturally track internal states more closely tend to experience a stronger reaction to environments that require constant comparison or subtle self-presentation. Not because they are weaker, but because they are noticing more. What looked like overthinking is often just higher resolution perception. And when that kind of mind enters a space built on continuous presentation, curated images, selective moments, invisible audiences, it begins to register the gap more intensely. The gap between what is lived and what is shown. At first, this might not be fully conscious. It can feel like restlessness, or boredom, or a vague sense that something about the experience is not quite right. But over time, it becomes clearer. And this is where the interpretation usually goes wrong. From the outside, stepping away from social media can look like avoidance, like someone who cannot handle comparison, or someone who is disengaged from modern life. But what looked like avoidance may actually be something else, a form of filtering. Not everything needs to be consumed. Not every environment needs to be participated in. And some people recognize that earlier than others. It is worth noticing that this decision is rarely loud. There is no announcement, no strong rejection, just a quiet shift. The app is checked less often, then not at all. The habit dissolves without much explanation, and eventually, the absence stops feeling like a loss. It feels like relief. Not because social media is inherently harmful, but because for that particular mind, it was asking for something that did not feel natural to give. The constant low-level performance, the ongoing awareness of being seen, the subtle pressure to translate life into something shareable. For some, that translation is effortless. For others, it never quite settles, and this is where the pattern changes meaning. What looked like disconnection may actually be a different form of alignment, a preference for experiences that do not need to be framed, conversations that do not carry an audience, moments that can exist without being turned into something else. There is a certain kind of quiet that returns when that layer is removed. No tracking, no subtle comparison, no need to maintain a version of yourself across invisible spaces. Just experience as it is. And for the people who step away, that quiet is not empty. It is clean. The behavior was never about discipline. It was about perception. And once that perception becomes clear enough, some environments simply stop making sense to stay in.